Hi, welcome to today's presentation. The signature style talk I'm about to give corresponds with the text from our newsletter of September 25th under the same name. And if you were to access our website, photographydealers.com, and access this newsletter, you can read the text, which is probably better to do before you look at this talk. I remind you again that these talks are just talks. They're really not meant to be lectures. I'm not using notes, and they're really not meant to be art history lectures in a formal sense, but more opening a dialogue or a conversation about specific topics. And what I've written today is really to talk about how artists and which artists have developed a style that's kind of unique to them. And if you think of going to a gallery or a museum, and you could look across a room and just see a piece, and you immediately know, oh, that's a Rodin sculpture, or that's a Monet painting. What is it about those works that gives you that sense? And so when we talk about style and we talk about in a voice within art, it has to do with both the technique and, of course, the imagery. And that's the other point I'd like to bring across today, is that technique and art making are really not one and the same. How we go about making a print and how good a printer we are or how good a technician we are is not the only thing that matters. Of course, visual art is driven by our imagery. Technique or poor technique can ruin an image. If you're looking at a photograph and it's creased, or the contrast is bad, or it's the unspotted, or the mat is crooked, or whatever, those distractions really can take away from our work. And what we are looking for as image makers is we're looking for a marriage between a powerful, photographic image, how you see it, as well as a complementary technique. And just because, you might have 50 prints that are all platinum, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a body of work. Technique alone is not the glue that could hold a body of work together. It's, again, it's a marriage of seeing and interpretation and how you go about it. And the last thing I want to say before I begin is there's no blanket definition of all this, and I'll try to bring that out in today's talk. You really need to know about an artist's work before you can kind of make judgments. We don't judge a Diane Arbus photograph the same way we judge an Ansel Adams photograph. What we expect to see in an Ansel Adams photograph is 154 shades of gray, detail in the highlights, detail in the shadows, and this beautiful perfection of his landscape photographs. Whereas when we're looking at someone else's work, we don't judge it for that. We don't look at a Diane Arbus print the same way. We don't expect to find that kind of tonal range. We don't expect to find that kind of perfection. But within her own work, we do expect certain things. We expect a look, a print that is appropriate for the kind of work that she does. So I can't really put out there, a set of rules of technique or rules of vision. When we collect or develop some kind of connoisseurship in looking at various artists' work, we really need to know, what's right for them. Let's start by looking at the work of Diane Arbus. Diane Arbus had a way of making these direct, I don't want to use the word confrontational, but, very direct portraits of, in some cases, unusual people or people who might be doing unusual things. She sought her subjects in various ways, but the consistency in how she went about photographing her subjects with not only the sensitivity and respect, but without taking away any kind of irony, or any kind of differences that her subjects might have. And the more we go through her work, the more we can start to identify these visual hints that basically tell us that this is a Diane Arbus photograph. It's, in the technique side of the discussion, yes, she works square. So all her photographs are square. She does tend to place her subjects in the center of every frame. She does, compel us, to get closer, compel us to look, what's going on here, what's happening, where are we, what are they doing, what are we doing? But I would state that, it would be very hard to mistake a Diane Arbus photograph. When you see one of her photographs, it has her stamp on it, and that stamp again is bringing all these things into place. It's subject matter, printing style, the format of the prints, and there's a directness to them that's really unmistakably her. A very different type of work would be the work of Henri Cartier-Bresson. It's kind of in question whether Bresson coined the term the decisive moment, or it was a term that was assigned to his work by a reviewer or a writer. But in any case, his work typifies this notion of the decisive moment, being able to kind of capture the apex, the very moment of the action that's about to take place. I think many people confuse, this with speed and quickness, and I would say those of you who are photographers know this, that, if you see something happening, it's too late to take the picture. It's too late to photograph. And when we think of the decisive moment, and when we think of the genius of Cartier-Bresson, it's not just his ability of composing his imagery beautifully, and bringing us in with mystery and concern, but he has the ability to recognize what's going to happen before it happens. If you look at this image of the what some people refer to as the puddle jumper, but he's standing there. He sees the puddle. He sees the ladder. On the left is probably where the street ends, and on the right is probably where the street continues. And Bresson knows that sooner or later someone's going to come along and have to try to make that jump. And of course, if you look at the man in the background, behind the fence, he's probably watching Bresson to say, why is that photographer standing there? Why is that guy there with the camera? And then if you look at the posters on the wall, which are the ballet, and you look at that ballet dancer going across that poster, mimicking the shape and the form of the man jumping that puddle, you see how everything comes into place. But if Bresson waited till he saw this, he couldn't have made the picture. He had to be able to predict that this was going to happen. So, as photographers, when we think of the decisive moment, we need to think about being able to see the potential for photographs to happen and be at the ready so we could make the image when it does happen. Those of you who are familiar with the concept in painting of the golden mean or the golden section, or there's various terms for the way Bresson applies that theory to his compositions. And time again, you can, you know, see how he places his subjects in the frame over and over and over again. And it brings this visual power and this visual consistency to all of his work that really brings his work together. Whether he's photographing kids playing in the rubble, or that man jumping in the street, or this image, or any of his work, they just all flow together seamlessly visually. Bresson really is one of the people that elevated the small camera, the 35 millimeter camera, that to that of a tool for art making at a time when a lot of people were looking at view camera photography, large format photography, as the more serious photography, or those were the real artists. And I think it was Bresson who showed the world that it's really not the equipment, of course, but that this device was certainly capable of producing great art. And it's really the power of seeing and the power of composing that makes these works so great. It was Walter Chappell that I was thinking about when I wrote in today's newsletter that years ago, at the beginning of Janet's and my beginning the gallery venture, we installed an exhibition in our gallery of Walter's work, and it covered various aspects of his work, from his still lifes to his nudes to his portraits and to his metaflora photographs. And I have to say, we were, as I wrote, we were amazed after we hung the show, and when we stepped back and looked at it, we were amazed how there was this incredible consistency of vision. And when I write today about what it means to transcend subject matter, that there's something that could go, it's not just about the subject, it's about the way we see that subject that really brings together a body of work. It was Walter's work that I had in mind. I like this quote. Last week's newsletter was about Stieglitz and his equivalents. And of course, as much as Stieglitz named, assigned this name equivalence to certain kind of image making, Minor White, Walter Chappell, a number of photographers picked up on this notion and also produced series of equivalents. But with Walter, really, what I was, what Jan and I experienced in hanging that show, whether it's a cabbage leaf or a signature pod or a white picket fence or totally a cameraless image of a fern, there's something about the way he composes, the way he uses the frame, the way he prints, his style, his use of contrast, the way he captures things. Everything just fits together. This image I'll speak about for a minute is part of a series that Walter did called Metaflora photographs. That's META, Metaflora. These are produced in the darkroom by charging high amounts of electricity through the objects that are placed down on a metal plate. And it seems, I'm not a scientist, but when living things are charged with high amounts of electricity, there's a moment that that protons, which I guess all things are made of, turn to photons, and photons emit light. So as much as they're not seen by the human eye, they are seen by film. So these images are produced in this very mystical way, and many read them as part of Walter's attempt to really access other levels of consciousness. They're kind of a metaphor for being able to go to another plane that's we can't see with our human eye, which again brings up reminiscences of Minor White's infrared photographs, which again are often thought of as being equivalent to trying to work at a level that's beyond our actual vision, to work in areas that cannot be seen, but that can be seen photographically. And maybe the person who laid the groundwork for all this, it would be the great master of photography, Edward Weston. This notion of photographing everyday things in a way they've never been seen before. Being able to capture something that goes beyond what it actually is, but by the strength of your seeing, as I wrote today, that Weston felt the strongest way of seeing is through composition, by the way you compose, by the way, the angle that you use, the equipment you use, how everything falls into place. The imagery has a way of transcending, and there's a flow, whether it's a rock or a part of the human body or a piece of fruit. And of all these photographers that we're looking at today, probably Edward Weston worked the simplest. He made contact prints. He really didn't enlarge. In his darkroom, he had a bare light bulb and a printing frame. So these images are shot with an 8x10 camera. The negatives are developed. They're then laid on a piece of photographic paper. A light bulb is turned on, a light bulb is turned off, and it's developed. His prints are some of the most beautiful in all of photographic history. And again, he worked in the barest bones way. And again, it kind of reiterates this notion that it's really not about equipment. It's about the equipment that's on your shoulders. It's not about, and I'm meaning your head, I don't mean on a camera strap, but it's really about, using what Ansel Adams would call your mind's eye, really being able to see in a very special way that connects beyond your subject matter. And this nude we're looking at right now, and comparing it to this pepper, kind of probably I only needed those two photographs to make the point I'm trying to make today about developing an artistic style or developing a signature style. And we all can do this. We just have to know what it is about the way we see individually. What is our strength? What is it about the way you photograph something or you collect something that tells us about you and who you are? And it's that kind of individuality and that kind of uniqueness that really translates to the strength in art making. Thank you for spending these 22 minutes with me. Um, Again, I'll try to do these talks periodically. I do get nervous that they'll be taken out of context, and I don't know, if they make any sense without reading the actual newsletter. So please access our website at photographydealers.com. All of our weekly newsletters are up, and you could specifically this one. I would really prefer if you read it first, and then use this little presentation to reinforce the points I'm trying to make. Thank you again. Stay safe, be well, and please don't forget to vote.